All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ed Up Edge, where we get to talk about all things career education, leadership, and life hacks because higher education can be very stressful. But today we're talking about how to manage high performing admissions teams who are remote. This is actually a trending topic because so many leaders are struggling, especially those who are used to brick and mortar campuses because they just can't walk down the hall every 5 to 7 minutes and peer into their advisors' offices to ensure that they're working. Right. But sometimes you may be wondering, do I have advisors who are sitting at their desk at home crying right now? How do I know that they're going to be successful? Right. So now we're going to get into how do you ensure that your remote teams are excited? And how do you provide the resources needed to make sure that they remain motivated? So of course I had to bring on my girl, Rachel Lawler. Okay, she's the director of admissions with Charter College. And you know what, Rachel, I so appreciate your leadership style. I mean, I did a pop-up training with her team about a month ago, and it was such a fun experience. So welcome to the crew, Rachel.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. So, Rachel, I always start off by asking, how did you get into higher education of all the things that you could have done?
I fell into it. It's not romantic. I was, you know what I mean? That was an enrollment coordinator for an assisted living that was family
Oh,
run early in my 20s. And when you're in a family run business, the ceiling is pretty low if you're not related. You know what I mean? So as I identified that, I started looking for things that had transferable types of skills, things that I could do to make a
ah,
leap. And I saw an opportunity to join an admissions team, and I made that leap in my
mhm.
early 20s, and it was just a wrap from there. I loved it, absolutely loved it.
Wow. You know what's funny? Every time I ask that question and people say they fell into, higher education, sometimes they don't plan to stick. Sometimes they're like, let me try this out as I'm moving through. And then 25 years later, they're like, yeah, I'm still here.
Yes, still here, still here.
Let me ask you, when you got into admissions, is it what you thought it was going to be?
Absolutely not. No, not at all. I remember walking
Okay.
into the group interview.
Uh-huh.
I remember getting the interview in my early 20s and being so excited, right? And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
I need a suit jacket immediately. Like I'm 21 years old. I'm like, so like what? My boyfriend at the time, he's like, what are you
Mhm.
doing? I'm like, I just need to go to Ross and I need to get a suit jacket because, and thinking I'm really, thinking I'm walking into maybe something else. And I arrive
Mhm.
and there's 30 other people in the lobby. I'm like, all right,
Wow.
okay, okay. Only three of us have a suit jacket on. I'm doing it.
Boom, I'm in.
Hello. 27 people just evaporated from the lineup.
That is hilarious. What were some of the misconceptions that you think people normally have with admissions? And then when they get into the role, they're like, wait, hold on for a second. This is not what I thought.
I think that typically you think more of an Ivy League when you think of an admissions representative, maybe that process, whatever you've heard of it, of
Mm,
like that maybe they're more gatekeepers or maybe they're really going to be, um, the application process, whatever your expectations are of the application process or whatever your personal experience was going to college, you're going to project a lot of that into it.
yeah, that's true.
And it was very different coming in to higher ed in the for-profit sector and seeing, oh no, we're advocates.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute, I'm not a gatekeeper. Like I've got the keys. Like I'm giving
Yeah.
you the keys. I'm opening all like, and so that
Uh-huh.
shift was pretty transformational for me in terms of the potential for this role, in terms of really having the opportunity to affect people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and using the talents I have to be able to create those bridges for people was really an enlightening thing.
You know what? That's really interesting because when you even watch Lifetime movies, right, and it has anything to do with college, they always depict the traditional sector, right,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
how the admissions teams are there. A lot of times you'll see a committee, right? So it's 10 people
Yeah.
sitting around the table, they're reading applications, and they're like, nope, garbage, garbage. Ooh, is that her mother? And now they get into the role and they're thinking it's going to be the same setup And career education is totally different. It's one advisor to one student, and you're walking that student through the entire process. I think that's one thing that we need to play up more, especially in the
Yeah,
admissions interview, which we'll get into a little later. All right, awesome. Were you ever a director at a brick and mortar, or were you always online?
I was. Yeah, I started as an admissions representative and worked
Uh
with
huh.
on a brick and mortar, transitioned to being a team lead, and then ultimately corporate director of admissions for a couple of for an organization, and then made the transition to online about last year. So I've been online for about a year and a half.
Okay, so that's even more perfect, okay? Because I talk to so many enrollment directors and they're like, I just cannot adjust to the online thing. Because when you're sitting in front of your advisors and you're able to call everyone into the office and have a meet, it's totally different. It is night and day. So, what was the most challenging thing for you transitioning into an online enrollment leader?
Uh, I think probably just the time management in terms of really locking in and sticking to your schedule.
Mm,
Because I came from a situation where it was much more hybrid. So I
yeah.
was doing things online, especially at the level I was partially online, but partially on campuses. I would do like campus visits. And so for me, it was a
Mm,
transition back to, and also a mindset, like you're like working from home. It's a desk
yeah.
job in your house.
Oh,
It's a,
definitely.
and so that's a mind. So that was, I mean, just being fully transparent, that was the
Yeah.
shift. I'm like, oh, online, that's perfect. It's just like what I was doing before. It's like, no, hybrid and online are not the same. They are not the same, but I'd still take it any day of the week. I absolutely
Yeah.
love it, the benefits that come with it. But yeah, I think managing my time effectively and making sure that really just sticking to the calendar with the things that I've set out, um, but also being able to know what things you can cut when you need to, because there's going to always be
Mm,
those competing priorities,
yeah.
and everything does take a little bit more time than when you were in person. Because in person, I can just grab everybody. Hey guys, let's do this really quick.
Yeah.
Whereas remote, I may it's going to be maybe one meeting might end up be actually take 6 calls
Yeah.
because I've got to find the people or schedule it, or it's so just coordinating, dialing in. I think the organization piece was a little challenging.
That's so true because when you're at a campus and you want to call like a meeting,
Yeah,
impromptu, you can easily just walk around the campus and you can see, okay, everybody's off the phones,
mm-hmm.
so you just be like, my office, my office, my office. Online, it's like, who's talking to a student right now? If you
Yeah,
have that system where it's like, okay, that person is still on the phone. Okay, this one is off. Okay, great. This one just got on the call. And it's like a meeting would take forever just to schedule. That is so true. Okay. Well, you know what? Let's get into managing high performance teams. So before we get there, let's define what is a high performing admissions team, because I think a lot of people feel it's all about just meeting expectations and metrics every single month. This is the team who's never missed a start, so they're high performing. That's not necessarily true. Okay. So what's your definition? What are some things you would think of?
I think that some of the characteristics that I would think of outside of, and I do think though that the first thing you met is a standard criteria. So I don't
Yep.
know that we have a high performing team that doesn't do what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, but we get like half the time. Uh, I mean, probably some work to do there. So I do actually think that hitting those outcomes is a significant part of being a high
Mm-hmm.
performing team, but it's not the only part. So I
There
think some
you
of the
go.
things you would look at is you've got to have people who are good collaborators. They can't rely on you to. One of the things I'll tell them, I'm like, it's kind of the nobody's coming. And they'll come to me and they're like, well, I didn't do it because I
Mm.
was waiting for you. I'm like, why would you do that? How would you do that? Like,
If you know better, do
and if
better.
you did, and if it really was, if this solution was dependent on me,
Yeah, what would you
why
do?
didn't you come get me? You know where I am. And so, did you really want to solve this problem, or did you just want enough time to go by to where it was impossible?
Mm.
And then now nobody's to blame because it just got away from you.
Yeah.
So I think you got to find people who take extreme responsibility for the things they're responsible for. And I think that that's a hard thing to find, but it's definitely out there. And so, yeah, got to have people who take responsibility for the things they're responsible for, that the ability to keep the main thing, despite all the distractions that come and go. Um,
Mhm.
and strong collaborative skills. I think that that's in any environment, but definitely in a remote and an online environment. So building those relationships is a little harder. They have to make that extra effort. Just like
Hmm.
they can't walk down the hall and go, or they're not going to run into their FA person and be able to
Yeah.
kind of talk about their weekend and build some of that softness. They're going to have to actively go out of their way to do that.
Yep.
Which, when you're remote, a lot of the times it becomes very transactional
Yeah.
because it's an effort. You got to make the call. You got to reach out, and so the relationships very easily can slide into a siloed or a transactional environment, which is detrimental to your success. It's going to cost you time, which is going to cost you speed, which is going to
Hmm.
cost you results, right? So I think those are some of the big things.
Absolutely. You mentioned something very important about speed. And I've learned that uncertainty leads you to lack of speed. If you have no idea what you're doing, if you're not clear on your goals and your motives, you slow down because you're confused. And I think sometimes we may have high performing admissions teams where the team itself are consistently meeting starts, but everybody on that team is not on the same page.
Right.
You have a couple of folks who are underperforming month after month, and I think sometimes they get glazed over because the team as a whole is doing well, but you got a bunch of people over there in the lake drowning. And it's like, hello,
That's
I'm lost over
huge.
here.
That's huge. And I think that that's one of the things that on a high performing team, you'll know if you have one because your underperformers will identify themselves. They'll
There
come
you go.
forward. They'll say, I feel so uncomfortable. I did a meeting on Wednesday. This is
Uh-huh.
the best. I just had a couple of people join my team. We just absorbed a little bit of a different region, whatever enrollment budget. And so I had a couple ladies join my team that were on a different team, and now they're with us. And so on Wednesday, we do like our kickoff call and doing that. And I'm going over everybody's numbers. We're like, listen, this is a great time. Let's go see. We're going over it. We're
Uh-huh.
very transparent about outcomes. We don't hide the good or the bad. Everybody can see it anyway. Everybody already knows anyway.
Yeah.
So what are we doing? Let's talk about it. And so we're going down it. And only one person, one of the newer ladies that joined the team, everybody's above 100% to their budget, right? To
Nice.
KPI. And I get to the last one, and then she's at 100%. And she goes, this would be the start that you guys picked me, and I only hit 100. I never only hit 100.
Wow.
You know that you have a culture and you have people who really take extreme responsibility for their contributions when they're like, you would look at me at the time I only hit 100.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm not. I look at you all the time, but that is just how the dice fell this time. And so
Yeah.
those are the types of people. In large part, you'll see a lot of leaders, I think, that will take responsibility or take credit. But I think a big part of what we do is we just create the space for the people who already have those characteristics to do what they were going to do.
Yeah.
We don't get in their way. We don't stifle their ability to do what they need to do. We give them the trust and space that they need to do that, and then the
Hmm.
tools and support that they need
Yeah.
to hit their best possible outcome.
Yeah.
I think that's our role.
Yeah. And you know what? You said something very important. Meeting people where they are. I think sometimes when it comes to high performing teams, first of all, the fact that she's like, I only hit 100% of my budget. There's so many of the teams that say, what do you mean you only hit 100% of your budget, right? But she's looking at people who have done way more than that. But wait a minute, that's an excellent job. And I think
Huge.
sometimes, exactly, I think sometimes advisors have to understand that where you are in your journey, those are still wins. I came from a very huge team, 18 years ago, 22 people. There were probably six people who were given consistent goals of 11 or 12 starts a month, right? A lot of us had 18 to 25. But just because those people had 11 to 12, that does not mean that they were unperformers.
Right.
Underperformers, if they were
Mm-hmm.
doing 4 or 5, okay, now we need to have a discussion,
Yeah.
right? But 12 to 13 at that time is excellent, and you're consistent at that level.
Absolutely.
So you have to be able to know who are your team members, what can they do, and is it still adding to the overall? Yes, it is. Those are not underperformers, but you had high performers who can actually contribute more. That's fine.
Absolutely. Well, and then when you really start to look at your team and you appreciate them as their individuals, and if you're looking at data or you're looking at
Yeah.
performance, you're consistent in that. Um, you may find somebody that, yes, you hit the KPI, but you have an exceptionally high close rate. You have
Yeah.
an exceptionally high start rate. I'd like for you to talk in the next meeting. Like
Yeah.
I mean, so I think that when you another thing that you could do, or that I do, is I actively try to find people doing things right. I'm actively seeking out any area. Now, this isn't, if we're underperforming. Don't get me wrong. I can't paint this picture for you. It's not fair to you
Yeah.
for me to create a situation where you have any uncertainty
Mm-hmm.
about where you are versus where we need you to be.
Yeah.
So I just got to be careful when I say that like we need to always fight, because that's like that. That's where you start drifting towards like not reality, and then people get so surprised. What do you mean I'm on a pip? What?
Everything that
What?
you've been saying for the last 6 months is I'm an amazing employee and I do nothing
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah. We just talk about, Taylor Swift and all of it. I'm like, what? No, that wasn't me. I don't know. I think you must have been talking to somebody else about that.
Wrong team.
Yeah, and so, but when you do have the opportunity, you should be actively looking. I think what Steve Covey has a thing about the races. Don't kill the goose.
Yeah.
Don't kill the goose. So when you're coaching conversations, yes, there's going to be areas of opportunity. You got to get really clear, specific goals and tools and expectations and timelines. But there's a line that you can cross where you kill the goose.
Yeah.
Where they're like, you know what? There's no win for me here. I can't do
Hmm.
anything right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's very, very important to be have that self awareness of where you are in regards to that line with your people.
Absolutely. What about data driven decision making? Using data to distribute goals effectively. I've seen this so many times and it's like, okay, if you're giving out these same metrics every single month and you're not meeting them, all right, we're not going to try that same thing every single session. It doesn't make any sense because now your advisors get to the point where, just like you said, you know what, I can't ever do anything right. I'm consistently failing. Look at the data and say we need to make adjustments. If you have to bring in other departments and say, all right, marketing, you've been giving us these types of leads for the last few starts and they're not working. Can we have a discussion about different types of lead sources that we can use just to switch it up? And I don't think some leaders take that time to say, this isn't working, so we need to look at something else. It's always well, we've always done it this way. Yeah, but that's not
Right.
working. You're going to lose your whole team.
Yeah, for sure. I think a big part of that in terms of assisting your team is just educating your team on lead sources and expectations around lead sources. I think there's
Hmm.
directors who are scared to do that because they'll say, oh no, because now they're going to treat them different. Well, if they understand how many people are trying to call this PPO, they might try to get to it a little faster because they got it either way.
Yeah.
You're stuck with this regardless, but you
Hmm.
have a chance to convert it. But if you
Yeah.
don't convert it in the first 5 to 10 minutes that you have it, you probably won't. So let's talk about your
Pretty
speed to.
much.
So I think that's just two different conversations. I think there's a conversation that you have with your rep so that they can keep that it's just strategy. So you're going to educate them and then you're going to help them put a strategy together based on that. One of the things I've found is that once you've educated them, one, you're creating a bench for leadership, which I think is something you should always do anyway. You're creating and elevating people inside of your team. That now I say this to my team, it's like if I get hit by a bus, like I would always hope that there would be a candidate or two
Who can just step
here
up?
ready.
I mean, unfortunate for you.
Yeah, but sad for everybody else, sure, whatever. But
Yeah.
as far as this goes, um, and that's just it. And whether or not that actually happens, all that's outside of my control. But that's always something that is in kind of my leadership philosophy. So those are two different conversations. I think there's a conversation absolutely. You got to look at the data. You have to know how to understand the data. You got to be able to understand and put narratives behind it, so that you can put strategy behind it. If you're finding that the lead mix isn't necessarily appropriate according to your goals, then absolutely you have a conversation with your marketing team individually. But in terms of the conversation to the team, you don't want them getting off track. All they can do is what they can do.
Yeah.
It might be, even if the marketing changed it today, that's 30 to 60 days before that comes through. So what are we going
Exactly.
to do with the leads now?
Hmm.
And so another part of being in this role is being able to have the appropriate conversations with the appropriate people to get the results you want. And so somebody in my role, you're playing on different fields all the time,
Absolutely.
and it's a different conversation on each field.
Every single person. And that leads into my next point, which is strong leadership. Having a leader who is actually supportive and who can empathize with their team. I've heard someone who's in a very high position, everything that this person or their team had to face, it's drama, right? You cannot always dismiss someone's trauma as drama. And this is why people lose trust in leadership. One thing that I've always loved about you, you've said one line and you said, as a leader, I'm like a DOA mill. My job, as much as I love my team members, I want to see them promoted out as other DOAs. And I don't think a lot of leaders come from that seat. It's more like a dictatorship, but it's like if you're a leader, your job is to want to promote other leaders. Of course, there's going to be a percentage of people that don't want any part of it. They're
Right.
like, oh no, this is what I want to do. I love being advisors, but there's
And we
a
love them too.
exactly we need them, right? But there's a lot of people who are looking for the next step. And I remember when I was an enrollment leader at another school a couple of years ago, one of my right hand people, she came to me and she's like, so Kat, I'm applying for this DOA position. And I was like, awesome, excellent. She went away and then she came back like 15 minutes later and she sat in front of me and she's like, wait a minute, you didn't even say anything. And I was like, what did you expect me to say? She was like, I thought you were going to give me the speech about, I don't think that you're ready. I need you here. And I said, well, then I wouldn't be here for your benefit. I'm not going to
Yeah,
stop you from wanting to stretch your wings. If you want to be a DOA, then we can get together and I'll train you to get there. But she expected me to say, no, you're not ready. And there are leaders out there who would just keep their people back because they're their right hand people, you
for
know?
sure. Well, and I think that it's that they're the right hand people, but I think that there's also a lot of fear
Yeah.
inside of it. Um, and I think that it comes out. And I think that if that's how you react as a leader in that moment, then you probably react that way very similarly in other moments
Yeah.
throughout your leadership that transcends into your culture. Your culture knows that.
That's
There's
so
not
true.
much that your culture you can't. These people see you every day. They know,
Mm-hmm.
like, and so having that consistency of character um, is incredibly important. And if there's an opportunity, I think for people, you should encourage them always to shoot their shot, um, and always be creating opportunities for them to grow inside of their role until that becomes available. Um, if they're as long as we got the main thing, the main thing. I think that's what I always tell everybody on my team. As long as you can keep the main thing, however many other things come and go,
There you go.
I'm excited for you.
There you go. And you know what? All of this ties into a high performing team. So initially, we're talking about a team who consistently meets their expectations every session. But if we take a step back, there's a couple of things that need to happen in order for you to have that type of team. And that's what we went through just now as far as setting clear goals, data driven decisions, knowing who your team members are and managing them accordingly. So now that we've identified that, I know a lot of people struggle when it comes to finding the right advisors.
Oof.
Like the characteristics of finding the right person to fit into admissions. Because let's get real, everybody can't do this job. Some people
They
may think they got it in the bag, and they really don't.
I think I had that conversation with somebody yesterday. We were talking about something, and I said, "Well," they said, "What about this and this?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "And you know what?" Some people just aren't for this life,
Ooh,
and that's not being condescending. That's not being anything. If anything, there's a kindness to that,
yeah.
because if you're in a position that you're not fit for, that you're not in alignment with, um, it's going to chip away at you until something gives, and it's probably not going to be the job. The job's not going to give.
Uh, Hello.
So
Okay. And one of those characteristics is being coachable. I don't think people realize that hiring people who are not coachable lead to a toxic environment. Okay. If you always have that person on the team who's pushing back, and you can pick up on that trait in an interview. You're
immediately.
interviewing someone and it's like you can't even finish a sentence. It's like as soon as you start talking, they're like, oh yeah, because I've done that before. And in the back of your mind, you're like, you're not going to be on this team. You can't even listen in an interview.
I think you always know if they say, like I said before.
Ooh,
Okay,
pardon?
I am so sorry that I missed that, and I am so happy that I heard it. Now, yeah,
It's funny because we talk about when a student says that,
yeah,
that says that an advisor is not listening. I've heard it so
yeah.
many times on calls and it makes me cringe. But when you say that in an interview, okay, do you want this job or no?
I think that's what it comes down to. I think that what it comes down to. Let me just say, even if that's the case, perhaps I asked a similar question, right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily know the motivation, so to assume that the person's not listening, even if they were, okay, even if they weren't,
Mm-hmm.
okay. But what if they need? What if this is your second shot to do a better job at that answer?
Exactly.
Because I did ask it a minute ago. It wasn't, you didn't bomb it, but you also didn't win. So I'm gonna ask it again in a different way to see if you can come. If you, I'm trying to see if you can get there. But if you're operating from a place of defensiveness and you're immediately like, oh, you're not even, like I said, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. We are gonna be in
Mm-hmm.
touch. Because part of that
Yeah.
is, don't get me wrong, that's not after, we're not going to immediately say we'll be in touch, but you only get
Yeah,
so many
that's two
shots at
minutes
that.
later.
Yeah, too many shots. How many shots do you get at that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's inappropriate. What about ooh, this is a good one. Adaptability. Oh my gosh. Okay, first of all, when it comes to higher education, there's like a change every 24 hours, right? But if you're going to be the advisor who every single time there is a tweak or a change, there has to be this big production, and we have to give you 7 days to actually be okay with the change. First of all, you're slowing down the process and you're slowing down the rest of the team.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that agility is super important.
Hmm.
I've been really fortunate to have a lot of really great mentors, I think, throughout my career. And I think that's one of them. One of the things he would say is, "Oh, we would have won if it didn't rain." Like, oh, well, you don't play in the rain.
Hmm.
Oh, you only play when the sun's out,
Hmm.
78 degrees, the wind's coming from the west. Well, we can't be so fickle. We can't
Yeah.
be so we have you. So that's what you say. Adaptability. One of the things I put down is just that resilience.
Yeah.
You've got to be resilient. It's not going to be perfect. Your onboarding, no matter where you go, may not be perfect. It may not meet your standards. It may not be what you expected. Okay, what are you going to do now? The
Yeah.
faster you can get to what are you going to do now, the faster you can just get to accept what it is and say, what am I
Hmm.
going to do now? That's part of taking extreme ownership for your situation because you still have
Absolutely.
choices. You still have choices. You could wake up today and try to figure it out, or you could wake up and
Hmm.
say, I'm sorry, this wasn't the agreement, and you can move on. And so I think
Absolutely.
that's part of a high performer is that they stay strong in that I always have choices.
Hmm.
I'm here because I want to be. I've taken on this challenge because I'm capable. I want to do this.
Yeah.
Versus the it's happening to me. This was
That's
wrong.
the thing.
That was wrong. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. Like I think you had a video the other day with the taking accountability, the finger
Yep.
pointing.
Hmm.
Oh, I would have done well, but FA, they didn't come through. I would have
Exactly.
done well, but this didn't happen. I didn't. If you lost your student in FA, you probably didn't have them.
There you go. There you go. And I think that's something that people need to understand. It's not always everyone that you might have lost it at that step in the process,
Yeah,
but you probably lost them a couple steps prior.
but
Because
how
if,
well did you prepare them for that step
there
in the
you go.
process?
There you go. You have to set the standard from the very beginning. These students need to understand what is expected of them. And I think sometimes it's just a pass off. Okay, now they're enrolled.
Yeah.
I got about 10 more people that I need to enroll. So you take care of that, and I'm going to get back to the phones. No, this is why everyone cannot do this job. What about business instincts? Advisors have to understand that your class start, that's your mini business. And it's so crazy being in this industry for so long. I'm sure you still see advisors where it's like, what do you mean you haven't called them in the last 3 weeks? What do you mean you haven't? Oh, they're good. They're good. They're solid. Define solid. Did you read the note in the system yesterday from financial aid that said this person want to take a little bit more time to think about it? No, I didn't see that note because they were good the last time that I spoke to them. When you really take something as your business, you're looking at every single angle every single day to make sure that nothing has changed.
Absolutely. No, I think they do that. And once they really start to do it, you create them. And when you're clear with them about what you can and can't do. So on my team, we've grown quite a bit and we've got a pretty big book. And so there's times when I can help try to reach out to people,
Yeah,
and then
use
there's
your
times when I
resources.
can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so this last one we came through, we are coming towards the end. I said, hey, and then I had a rep ask me, and it's something they had done before. But hey, can we swap everybody's like our UTCs? Those are the unable to contact. Can we just
Mm-hmm.
for an hour just everybody call, like partner up and call
Nice.
each other's UTCs and see if a different phone number will help and get
Mm-hmm.
them re-engaged so we can move them forward? I said absolutely, because if you're waiting for me to do it, if you're waiting for me to do it, yeah, don't do not put all your eggs in that basket, because it's not a
Yeah,
matter of wanting to or not. It's about the ability. It's about resources. And so when you
exactly.
have people who take that extreme accountability for their success, they're going to start looking for help. They're going to start like, okay, you're too busy. I get it. Can we do this? Can we do this? So a lot of the solutions that we have, I have to be very transparent, come from the team.
I love that.
They come up, they're like, hey, can we do this? I'm like, of course you can,
Mm-hmm.
of course.
Yeah.
Most of the time they're already doing it. They're like, great, because we started yesterday. Like, awesome. That is great. And it's because everybody's really clear on what the end goal is,
Yes.
and so they know where the lines are. And so I'm not a bottleneck for creativity. I'm not a bottleneck for initiative. I'm not a bottleneck. They can lean on each other, and they have a really healthy dynamic, I think, in that regard.
That's excellent because that actually contributes to, a high performing team also. Every member understanding their role and how it plays into the overall institutional goal. Sometimes you have different teams that are in their own box. So admissions is admissions, financial aid is financial aid, academics is academics. But if every advisor can understand, okay, everything that I do at the front end, this is going to be a trickle down effect. Okay. And then when instructors are absolutely pissed off at the admissions teams and they're
Yeah.
like, who is this why did this person enroll? Sometimes advisors can't say, oh my gosh, it's always admissions. No, sometimes it is you. And I'm an advocate
Mhm.
for admissions, of course, but there are times where it's like, that when this person hit academics, they were going to have a hard time. When they hit career services, they're not going to
Yeah.
be able to place them. It starts at the beginning and looking at every student like, okay, these are my babies. This is my business. Am I providing the best opportunity for them? And I think you do an excellent job for that. With that in leadership too, when it comes to your team. This is why they start things and they're like, okay, we started yesterday because they know that you trust them.
And they know that if it makes sense,
You're going to be like,
why are you
oh, what are you
waiting
waiting for?
for me? Yeah, like what are you? Yeah, it could have been I am. We didn't need to have a meeting about that. What do you do? And that's another thing with remote guys. To stop. Don't meet people to death. That's something I will put out there about managing remote teams. Some of the things I've seen is people, the leaders will put meetings all over people's calendar, and then send them an email at the end of the day asking why they didn't make calls, like they weren't there
Yeah.
because you had them in meetings all day. Because you were worried they weren't working because they were at home, so you put them in a meeting, but then they couldn't do their
Yeah.
job. And so
Yeah.
that's the other thing. I think I see a lot of leaders remote sometimes do a lot of like gatekeeping, just because they're like want to make sure. I don't know if gatekeeping is the right word, but you know what I mean. They want to make sure that the people are working. They want to make sure they're engaged. I don't think that's the way to do it. I think that if anything, that can really stifle your people, and it's counterproductive, because if they're meeting with you, they're not meeting with a student.
And there you go. And it's funny because I have an ebook on leadership that launched like months ago. And one thing that I said in there is sometimes when you have leaders like that, it actually says that you lack confidence in yourself. You have to be inserted into everything because you don't trust that you've trained your team enough to be independent. and to be trustworthy. And one of the last traits I would talk about is problem solving. Okay. These advisors, they're solving problems every day, all day. Every single person that they talk to on the phone has something that they're lacking or something that they want more of. How are you going to help them get to the next step? Problem solving. You have to be able to listen, not to respond, but to understand what these
Yeah,
people are actually talking about so that you can, provide the right resources. And sometimes that may sound like, I don't think our school is the best fit for you at this time. And I think sometimes advisors are conditioned that every single lead is supposed to convert and start at my school,
yeah,
you know?
I agree.
Yep. So let's get into, how do you manage these people now? You just touched on one of them, as far as not having meetings all day. And that's actually on the brink of micromanaging because you can't
Yeah.
walk down the hall and go,
Mm-mm.
are you on the phone? Who are you talking to? But what are some other ways that you're able to manage high performing remote teams?
I would say it starts at the very beginning, just in terms of setting standards and expectations.
Hmm.
In terms of like, so for us, we operate, we use our chat quite a bit, and so one of the things I have to get everybody in line with is you got to imagine that we are a virtual campus, and
Yeah.
so people will put their lunches in there, and so one of the things I'll tell them is I'm like, you're, and then they'll laugh because they're like, you hearted my lunch like 2 hours late. I've been back for 2 hours. And I'm like, okay, this is, let me explain something to you. You are not putting that in there for me. I am not like Discord
Exactly.
meeting monitoring. Like, I'm not, that's not what I'm doing. You're putting it in there for your coworkers because no more than half of us can go to lunch at any given time. So
Exactly.
you're putting it in there for them. I'm not managing your time in that way. I just need to know you went to lunch at some point and come back. I mean,
Hmm.
but you've got to be able to have that autonomy. I think that that's critically important. I think people need to feel trusted, and I think there's an awkwardness at first when people transition to remote, where they
Yeah.
feel a little unsafe. Like, so
Hmm.
who do I want to go to lunch? Like, I'm here. I'm like, I know, you're
But
fine.
we can see
Oh
you.
yeah, you're good. And part of that is coming from other teams where maybe we're managed really closely. And don't get me wrong, I mean, we have mechanisms where I can see, like, I know.
Yeah.
But one of the big things that I talk to about my team when managing is, and this is a big thing that I think sometimes leaders do that is a pretty damaging, I think, for their teams, is I would think even more in a remote environment, because it's all on screen. And I use an AI note taker called
Okay.
Fireflies. So if anybody
Oh.
misses the meeting, they can go back and read the
Uh-huh.
notes. And so it's even more damaging if you do this because now it's recorded that this happened versus if you were in a meeting and it was just a one-off comment you made. But if one person on your team is struggling or just had a problem with something, taking the whole team on a lesson on this subject is
Yep.
pretty gross because everybody knows
Worthy.
everybody knows Tommy did that yesterday. Everybody knows that you're talking about Tommy. And not only does everybody know that, now not only did you beat Tommy up yesterday, now you're gonna also sit in a meeting while you train us all about what Tommy did yesterday.
When
And if
nobody
anybody
else
wants
has
to
had
really
that
look into
problem.
it, they can listen to it back in the notes.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that's just another thing. I think from a leadership perspective, you have to be really mindful about your feedback. It needs to be timely. It needs to be clear. It needs to be constructive. And it needs to be where it needs to be.
Yeah. And pretty much, it's funny you mentioned that because it reminded me of like some people who grew up in small towns and like everyone knew everyone's business. And so now
Yeah.
everyone goes to the same church. And
Mm-hmm.
now you have the pastor talking about a specific topic and everyone is looking around at that one individual because
That's it.
everyone knows he's talking about you.
That's it. Only one person went out last night. Everybody else was home. Everybody else was home.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. What about team meetings? How often do you meet? I like the one-on-one aspect every single week to kind of, talk about what happened the week prior and to set them up for, the upcoming week, strengths and opportunities. But what about group meetings? How often would you have those?
Group meetings, we have a 1 hour meeting on Wednesdays,
Okay.
where we do, one of the great things with Charter is they have a subscription to the Franklin Covey suite of leadership curriculum, and
Oh, nice.
it's really phenomenal. And so
Hmm.
we're going through the 7 habits of highly effective people. I
I
think it's
remember you
just
told me that.
timeless. There's timeless guidance in there, and we're kind of using that. I was using that was actually been a huge tool in terms of building the culture and the core values for the team, because they're pretty inarguable. I mean, you
Hmm.
really have to be going out of your way to create some drama around, put first things first.
Yeah.
Start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
That's not controversial.
No.
And it's pretty straightforward, and it translates into almost everything you do in life. And so it gives us a little bit of an opportunity sometimes to talk about things that are not admissions but are.
Yeah.
And 9 out of 10 times, whatever the subject matter is, it ties in perfectly. And my reps all take turns presenting it, so that's part of their
Hmm.
development, is learning how to kind of hold space online and in
I love
remote.
that.
Because if they were to promote whatever, they're on a team, then they need to get comfortable with this.
Yeah.
And so that's part of their practice and development. But 9 out of 10 times, whatever the subject matter is, they're like, it's just like what we were talking about yesterday with the cancels.
Hmm.
We need to really be listening. We need to have that empathic listening. Whatever the lesson is, 9 out of 10 times they can tie it right back to whatever
Yeah.
we're working on inside of our skill set.
Hmm.
And so that's our Wednesday. We don't do the whole hour. It's usually we alternate that with role plays. And we just do a half hour on Mondays and a half hour on Fridays,
I love that. You know what? I realized that within
and
a
then the
lot
one
of
on ones. Sorry.
I realized that within a lot of admissions teams, I feel like we don't talk enough about how things that happen in our personal lives, directly impact what happens at work. Before your admissions, you're first a person. And I think sometimes that when we talk about certain topics, people totally separate it because they're like, is this appropriate, for work? I was training a team a couple weeks ago, and I said that I want everyone to go around and talk about a win. And I don't want it to have anything to do with higher education or your numbers or enrollments or anything. And it took so long because that's all they're accustomed to. It has to be numbers related. It has to be about I came in at this number at the ending of the week. And it just started with one person who started talking about a sick mom that they had and how him and the sisters were able to come, together and create resources for the mom. So that was a huge win for him. And then a light bulb went off in everyone else's head, and everyone started talking about their personal wins that actually contributed to their mood and their
Yeah.
mindset, where now they were successful at work. And I think sometimes we need to talk more about, okay, let's talk about you as an individual. Where are you struggling? Because it is a direct correlation to their jobs. It's not always work. You're a person who has a life and things happen.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's huge in terms of. I think that's one of the things that I think we put that principle to ourselves, but remember that like if I'm not okay, nobody's okay,
Yeah.
right? I think that is everybody, right? Everybody's got to be okay. And so I
Hmm.
think that's something you really have to be mindful of with your team. Obviously, having conversations, creating opportunities for people to build a deeper relationship beyond just the numbers, beyond just the team.
Hmm.
Creating that opportunity is really important. But also taking a minute that if you have somebody on your team who is suddenly not doing or operating or the way that they typically do, that can be from a communication perspective, that can be um, from a performance perspective, to not have that reflex, like, oh, here, right? Because with admissions, sometimes that happens. You'll have somebody who just, right, maybe their performance can fluctuate, but taking a minute to talk to somebody and say, hey, are you all right?
Yeah.
Like in your one-on-ones, like how many people start their one-on-ones like, hey, how are you?
Nope. You just jump
How's it
back into,
going,
all right,
Kat?
let's talk about your performance from last week.
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
so, it's so important paying attention. And that's how quiet quitting starts. You're just talking about when someone all of a sudden there's a shift in their performance and attitude. And it's even worse when you're remote because you can't see their facial expressions, but you can tell in certain things that they would do on a weekly basis. And now all of a sudden it's like, okay, their behavior has changed. Something is going on. But some leaders are moving so quickly throughout the day, they don't even realize. They're not even paying attention. If you have a board where you can do you have that system where you can see who's actually on the phone?
Yes.
Being
Yep.
okay, you see somebody disappear for 3 hours and you're going through all the systems, you're going through all the teams. No one has heard from this person. They didn't drop that they're on lunch in
Hmm.
the chat, and it's like, anybody seen Rachel?
Yeah.
Rachel been in her bedroom crying for the last 2 to 3 hours. Nobody caught on to it. Sometimes, if you really know your team, you'll be able to catch on to what's going on with them when they pick up the phone and in the way that they say good morning. It's like, hold on for a second. Mm-mm. What's going on? You sound off. And they're like, how did you know? Because you care. You know your team members. You know when something is off. Well, the last thing is training. How often does your team train? Because believe it or not, there's still some admissions teams who do absolutely no training at all for the week.
So we do role plays once a week. That
Right.
was changed. I just started that about a month and a half ago. So we actually missed our first start in a year. So I've been with them about a year and a half. We missed our first start this last month, and I think that this also ties into high performing teams. This ties into resilience. This talks to what happens when you don't win.
Mm.
Oh my God, what do you mean? Yeah, sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
And so we
Yeah.
had missed our first ones, and our first one is last month. We had a lot happen. We changed a few different things, so we knew that there's going to be some impact. But for the team, and when you have a high performing team who's drawing, that's part of the identity,
Yeah.
right? So something like that could be like, wait, are we not now?
Yeah.
Are we not? Are we like, you
That's
know what I mean? It's like you're like a bodybuilder, and you take like a year off, and it's like, I'm not them anymore. I'm different now. No, you just been eating cake. It's not that tough. It's not that complicated, right? So, but it's crazy how little things like that can really shake your
yeah.
identity and shake the things you already know and make you question the things you do know. And so it was right after that when we missed it. It was really clear listening through and actually having you come on. We didn't do a role play, but I could tell very much it was helpful for me watching you interact with them because the things they were asking you or conversations you guys were having made it really clear a couple of different things. And like, so they don't know that.
Mm.
So you don't know that. And so for me, I'm like, okay, so this is how we're gonna craft the next couple steps forward
Mm-hmm.
based on this. And so after missing that last mod and having you come in, we were doing it already, maybe like once a month,
Mm-hmm.
and I just didn't feel like it was enough. When you're doing an online enrollment and over the phone,
Yeah.
and this is in person too. Don't get me wrong. It's one process, but it's really like four different processes
Yes.
all in one. Like there are technical pieces to
Mm-hmm.
each of them. And so if you're trying to train top to bottom in one call,
Not
you're speed
happening.
running it. It's not going to land. You can't. People aren't practicing, and the curve of forgetting, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can't revisit these topics enough. It's too broad
Mm-hmm.
that you're not going to hit everything. And so we just kind of broke the process down into four different chunks. Actually five, and we built a training wheel. And
Love it.
so, and it just goes with every week. And so, like
Mm-hmm.
last week, we were at the top. This next week, we're going to go into the middle where we go into program recommendation and going over the program. The next week, we're going to go over setting expectations and retention. Then the
Yeah.
next week, we're going to go into, right? Like, so we have a whole week. Oh, and then the last week, we train on cancel conversations
Mm.
because that's
Mm-hmm.
what we were talking about. Like, this isn't start week, this is cancel week.
Yeah.
These are all the people you've been sandbagging, saying, like, I really think it's going to work out. And then all of a sudden, they did it. So let's just get ahead of that. And
Uh-huh.
that's just our wheel. And we do that because that's one of the best things about admissions, I think, from a training perspective. You can build a cadence. You can
Yeah,
build,
you can.
yeah, it's not like another industry where it's like, you're just living quarter to quarter. You're living like,
Mm-hmm.
no, we're 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So you can build a wheel. And so this is our second start at the wheel. It was hugely beneficial last month, had a really significant impact. We had a really fantastic start. And I think we're off to another one. So it's a very
Love
long
it.
story to we role play once a week.
Look. In admissions, there's so many topics, but there's so many subcategories also. Someone had asked me a couple of weeks ago, it was just one simple topic. And I was like, well, that's 5 trainings. And she's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, if you're going to train that team on that topic, that's about 5 different sessions. There's no way you're going to cover that topic in a half an hour.
No, not
There's
effectively.
so exactly. And the thing is, you have to tell advisors the same thing over and over and over again, because with everything that they're inundated with throughout the day, they're going to forget what you just told them 10 minutes ago. And then it's like, did we spoke about that? Yeah, we actually did. And sometimes you're watching them and it's like they're listening to this like it's the first time it's been ever told to them. And you're sitting there going, really? Because we spoke about this like 10 times prior. But you have to keep reminding them. So training is critical, and to have a different voice too. Because we piggybacked off of each other. That was so much fun, right?
It
But
was so much fun, and they referenced you at least 4 or 5 times, like in the ensuing weeks. I guess we would talk about things. They'd be like, "Yeah, it's like what Kathy said," or when you and Kathy were. They brought up the flag thing. They're like, "Well, you guys were talking about the red flags, the green flags." So I think we really made something up there that was really landed with them,
uh-huh.
which was pretty cool. But no, I think that it was a really good experience for them. And even for me just to be able to watch them interact, because
Hmm.
when you're presenting,
Yeah,
it's
it's
different than
different.
when you're observing, or it should be.
Yeah,
Because if
it definitely is, though.
Yeah, and so that was a really helpful experience for us.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad I was able to jump in there. We still have
Yeah,
part two because a couple
I
of
know.
advisors were like, hello, I didn't get the invite. I've been
You've been
checking my email.
requested to return.
Interesting. Well, we need to get that scheduled. Well, I have a special question for you, Rachel. Was this the career path that you thought you were going to go down? Let's say when you were coming out of college, is this what you thought that you were going to do?
um, I would say no. Well, maybe because I was already I finished school while I was already working as an admissions representative. So I think I knew that that's the
Hmm.
direction probably that I was going to do. So I was doing business and things like that. But going further back, I would say no, no. I think we had a dental assistant one time come to our school who said my name in Spanish was Raquel, and I was like, I'm going to be a Spanish singer. That's it, Raquel. That's it. That's it. And so from about 8 to 25, I really thought
That
that's
you
what
were
was
going to
going
be a
to happen.
Spanish singer?
Oh yeah, I was going to hit the streets. And then, but I can't sing. I also do not speak
Rachel, I think we should
Spanish.
have led with that.
Yeah, I can't sing. I don't speak Spanish. So I think my chances were always very low, but I was optimistic. And we're, I think, very fortunate that admissions came along for everybody, because I don't think anybody needed that in their life to be trying to sing.
That optimism is an understatement, okay?
I believed.
Double negative. I shouldn't even talk because I thought I was going to be this crazy hairdresser and I was going to open so many different branches or turnkey like around the world, and that just never happened. But because of my experience when I started applying for college and the experience I had with my advisor, that's what really turned everything around, and I knew that this is what I wanted to dedicate my career to. But you were going to be a Spanish singer who doesn't sing or speak Spanish, and was going to be an international hairdresser. And yet here we are.
But I think you still have a chance. I think that is the difference. Like, I think you could actually still do that. I think the ship has sailed for me. I get some Duolingo maybe, but and then with auto tune, I mean,
See,
it's not
I
all the
love
way
it.
out. It's not all the way out.
Oh my gosh, Rachel, this has been such a fun conversation, and I know that you were definitely able to help hundreds of remote enrollment leaders who are out there pulling their strands out and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe this is not for me. I hope you guys were definitely taking notes, okay? Because Rachel is a game stopper. Rachel, do you have any last thoughts or suggestions or advice for our listeners?
I think the only thing I would add that I wanted to say earlier, because the hiring has been something very different, right? From having gone from on ground now to remote, um, that has been the learning curve. I wouldn't say that's the most difficult part, but that's been a learning curve in terms of also training and up onboarding, getting people up to speed. Something that I picked up pretty quickly that if everybody isn't already doing, I would really encourage you outside of the characteristics that we look for, there's an additional skill set that you need from your ARs if they're going to come online for them to be successful. So this is really for the ARs themselves if they're considering going remote and if they're going to be applying what they need to do to be competitive, but also what you should be looking for. You've got to have people who have basic demonstrated technology skills.
Oh,
That's just not something that I think we talk about enough. And
yeah.
so it's really tough sometimes because I'll talk to reps I talk to them on the phone. I'm like, man, you're fantastic. But ask, what systems are you familiar with? How are you with Excel? You're like, why do I need Excel?
Mm.
Well, if you can do Excel, you can probably do most of the other things.
Yeah,
um,
pretty much.
and a lot, the onboarding, at least what we have, maybe some schools and organizations are different. You have to come in with a baseline understanding. That doesn't mean you have to be a network administrator, software
Mhm.
developer, but you're going to be using two screens. You are going to be using at least 3 to 5 programs, sometimes at any given moment. And you've got to come in with a basic understanding. So to be competitive as an
Yeah.
admissions representative, if you have any certifications of proficiency, put those on your resume. And it doesn't have to be crazy. Like you don't have to be designing websites. You're like,
Mhm.
oh, should I put on there that I'm proficient in Word and Excel? Yes, you should.
Mhm.
And if you've taken a LinkedIn assessment that can demonstrate that you have a certificate, put that on there too.
Oh, yeah.
Because the game for an online rep is a little different in terms of um, trying what skills you're going to come into and how quickly you're going to ramp up. Because we can give you that training, but if you can't use the tools we're giving you, that's going to cost you time and ultimately
Yeah.
could cost you success. And I think for the managers, I would say definitely look for those, ask for what systems they use, and then role plays have been my favorite. And that's step 2 in our interview process. That's a thing
Really?
that's we got from Franklin Covey, and he
Mhm.
says you can't fake 20 push-ups. You just
That's
can't.
powerful.
And so that's one of the things we talk about on our team all the time. Like anytime somebody doesn't want to role play, they're like, we call this push-ups.
Ooh.
That's when I'm hiring people. A lot of times they're like, I was a DO. I have people on my team that were DOAs, associate DOAs, and I talk to people all the time who want to make the leap to remote.
Mhm.
But it comes down to, okay, great. Let's. They're like, I can do this. One of the first things we talk about is here's the salary, here are the hours, here are the expectations. Does that work for you? Because
Mhm.
I don't want to drag you through 3-step process to you
And
tell you
then
the big stuff at the end, and they're like, no. They're like, all right, great, perfect. The next step, let's jump into a role play. You already
ooh, I
know
love
right
that.
there who you're dealing with. They're like, who, when? I'm like, we'll schedule it. Are you interested in moving forward? They jump on. Especially if you're talking to somebody with experience. Experience doesn't mean the same thing everywhere. A DOA doesn't mean the same thing. That was for me to
Nope.
wrap my head around. A DOA here is not the same as a DOA there.
Exactly.
An AR here isn't the same as a senior rep here. So don't get excited
Mhm.
about all these about your senior ARs who are applying
Mhm.
because you've got to test that. Because once you've got them on, it's going. And
Yeah.
so anything you can do, either put on some kind of a really basic technology assessment on just to set them up for success. Make sure that they're just as much of a good match or that you're a good match for them just as much as they're a good match for you. And I think that starts the hiring process right there. Is being really
Yeah.
transparent about, okay, this is going to be the expectations. This is the job. This is what it's going to look like. And actually creating space for dialogue there, I think is super huge. And then testing them, do the role
Yeah.
plays.
I love
That's
the
been
role play
big.
in the interview. I love that. Would you do that for people who've never done admissions also?
I do. I do it for everybody. But the expectations may be a little different in
Oh
terms
yeah,
of what I'm
definitely.
looking for.
Definitely.
I think it goes to the coachability. When
Mm-hmm.
you talked about how coachability, it's like, well, how do we determine coachability? Well, we coach
Mm-hmm.
them right away.
Mm-hmm.
We see how does that land.
And if
So
you're
I'll just,
already giving pushback, like, oh no, the only reason why I said that was because no, just listen.
yeah, I feel like that's not what I said.
Listen.
Okay, all right, I apologize.
You know how training is gonna go.
Yep. If you already have me apologizing in the interview, I am very sorry
Like,
about
wait, why
that.
am I
I am really sorry. I must have missed. I
a
made a mistake, and
Oh
no.
man.
But I've given them, giving them that opportunity. But yeah, that's the one thing I did want to say when we were talking about hiring, because that was a changing moment for me with online. Because in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, I would say that we weren't as successful as we wanted to. Ultimately, we want to be able to hold as many people as we don't want. We want tenure if
Yeah.
possible. And so that starts at the very beginning. So if you want a tenured, high skilled team, well, then you need to be really intentional and a little bit more organized and strategic, starting at the very beginning with
Yeah.
setting expectations and giving people the information they need to make a good decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially when it comes to tenured people, because sometimes they have the tendency to want to take over the interview, which is why I love the fact that you role play, because sometimes you can look at an advisor and you're listening to everything that's coming out their mouth and you're saying to yourself, when you start, I bet you're going to be so behind. The ones that say that I enroll 15 to 20 people a week, and it's like, are you saying consistently? Yeah, some weeks 30. And it's like, really? Okay, let's do a little quick role play. And the first call is atrocious. And it's like, how are you even getting people to enroll with that type of conversation? You know, so it's like trust but verify. I believe what you're saying, but let's, put that to the test. I absolutely love that. And I hope people take that away with them too.
Me
Change your
too.
interview process, people.
Start with the end in mind,
Yeah.
like
There you
as Cody would say.
go. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on today. We're going to have to do a part two because, this conversation could go so many different ways, especially, okay, how do you deal with advisors who came from brick and mortar, who are transitioning into a remote position? Okay, it's just as challenging for them too, even more so challenging for those type of advisors. Okay, so we're going to do a part two if you are up to it from
Totally up
the
to
advisor side.
me.
All right, awesome. So, Rachel, thank you so much again. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We really appreciate you. Until next time, bye, everyone.
Bye.
I really hope that you enjoyed that episode. I have been working diligently to bring awareness to career schools. There's so much that they have to offer our students and our community. Every single role within the admissions process is critical, whether you're a part of the admissions team, financial aid, career services, academics, everyone deserves a voice. Admissions is the first point of contact for your school. So you want to ensure that you have a team who exudes confidence, passion, and a clear understanding of effective communication with our potential students. I totally understand the pain of missed class starts, low appointment and enrollment conversions, and this is why I created Next Level Admissions Training by Motivate with K.A.T. This platform is a step-by-step process, and it is going to train your new and tenured advisors in every single step of the enrollment process to ensure that our students are inspired and they're ready and prepared to start class. Admissions is not easy. It can be very challenging, but it's definitely worth it. So if you're ready to take your school to the next level, head on over to lessons.motivatewithkat.com and check out Next Level Admissions.